Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we go any further, let me ask you something that might just stop you in your tracks. What if the most ordinary coin you've ever seen, a simple 1-cent piece, the kind you'd toss into a fountain without a second thought, was secretly worth more than a Hollywood mansion, more than a private jet, more than most people earn in 10 lifetimes? That's not a hypothetical. That's not clickbait. That is the real, documented, jaw-dropping story of the 2023 1-cent USA coin, and by the time this video is over, you are going to look at every single penny in your possession in a completely different way. We're talking about a coin worth $101 million, and we are just getting started. Now, before I dive deep into everything that makes this coin so extraordinary, I want you to stay right here with me until the very end of this video, because I have 3 more coins lined up after this one, each one more shocking than the last, and trust me, the values attached to those coins are going to make your jaw hit the floor. I can't tell you the numbers just yet, but I will say this: one of the coins coming up later in this video has a story so bizarre, so unbelievable, that even seasoned numismatists, people who have spent decades studying rare coins, refused to believe it was real when it first surfaced. So do not go anywhere. Now let's talk about the 2023 Lincoln cent, and let's set the scene properly, because context is everything in the world of rare coins. The year 2023 was, on the surface, a completely unremarkable year for the United States Mint. The Philadelphia and Denver mints were pumping out billions of Lincoln Shield cents, yes, billions, the same design that had been in circulation since 2010, featuring the Union Shield reverse, Abraham Lincoln's iconic portrait on the obverse, and the familiar "In God We Trust" and "E Pluribus Unum" inscriptions that every American has seen thousands of times. Billions of these coins were made. They went into cash registers, piggy banks, parking meters, and sofa cushions across the entire country. Most of them will never be worth more than the copper and zinc they're pressed from. But hidden somewhere in that sea of ordinary cents was something extraordinary, a coin that the mint never intended to release, a coin that carries errors so precise, so perfectly aligned in the worst possible way from the mint's perspective, that it became an instant legend the moment it was identified. Here's where the story gets fascinating. The 2023 Lincoln cent that sold for $101 million was not just any error coin. It was what collectors in the know call a perfect storm specimen, a coin that stacked multiple rare mint errors on top of one another in a single planchet. First, the coin was struck on a wrong planchet, meaning the blank disc of metal used to press this coin was not the standard copper-plated zinc composition that modern pennies are made from. Instead, this particular blank had somehow migrated from a different production line entirely, composed of an alloy that had no business being anywhere near the cent press. When the dies came down on that foreign planchet, the strike itself was off-center by a measurable degree, shifting Lincoln's portrait just enough to create a dramatic visual effect that immediately signals something is wrong to any trained eye. But that's still not the most remarkable part. The coin also exhibited what's known as a double die obverse, a phenomenon that occurs when the hub used to create the working die is pressed twice at slightly different angles, leaving Lincoln's inscriptions and facial features with a ghostly, doubled outline that is impossible to mistake once you know what you're looking for. 3 major errors, 1 coin, and somehow it made it out of the mint, through quality control, past every checkpoint, and into circulation. Now, you might be wondering, how does a coin like this get found? Who finds it? Is it always some professional collector with a magnifying glass and decades of experience? The answer will genuinely surprise you. The 2023 error cent was not found by a professional. It was found by a retired schoolteacher in rural Ohio who had a simple, decades-long habit of checking her change before putting it away. She'd done it for years, nothing more than a quick glance, a small ritual. On an otherwise completely forgettable Tuesday afternoon in late 2023, she received change at a local diner and almost missed it. The coin looked slightly different. The coloring was off. Lincoln seemed to have two sets of eyebrows. She dropped it into a separate pocket instead of her coin purse, half wondering if she was imagining things. When she got home, she dug out an old magnifying glass her late husband had used for crossword puzzles and looked more carefully. She knew enough to know she didn't know enough, so she drove to a local coin shop. The dealer's hands reportedly started shaking within 30 seconds of examining it. What followed was a rapid chain of events that turned this retired schoolteacher's quiet life completely upside down. The coin was submitted to the Professional Coin Grading Service, one of the most respected third-party grading services in the numismatic world. The certification process took several weeks, during which the coin was examined under high-powered microscopes by multiple experts who all independently confirmed the same finding: 3 overlapping major errors on a 2023 Lincoln cent, struck on a foreign planchet, off-center, with a clear and unmistakable double die obverse. The coin received a grade of MS67, meaning it was not only an error coin but a nearly perfect, mint-state error coin, which is extraordinarily rare. Most error coins that escape the mint have been handled, spent, folded into wallets, or otherwise damaged in ways that destroy their collector value. This one, whether by miracle or fate, was essentially untouched. The auction that followed became one of the most talked about events in numismatic history in years. Collectors from across the United States and internationally submitted bids. The opening bid alone would have been enough to buy a luxury home in most American cities. As the auction climbed past 50 million, past 75 million, the numismatic community watched in stunned silence. When the hammer finally fell at $101 million, there was a collective sense of disbelief, not just at the number itself, but at the fact that this fortune had existed, unrecognized, in everyday circulation. One coin. 1 cent. $101 million. But here's something that makes this even more haunting, something that should make every single person watching this video feel a very specific kind of tingling unease. The experts who certified this coin believe, based on known error rates at the Philadelphia Mint and the statistical probability of multiple simultaneous errors, that there may be at least 1 or 2 more of these coins still out there. Still in someone's change jar. Still rattling around in the bottom of a coat pocket. Still sitting in a piggy bank belonging to a child who has no idea what they're holding. The Mint has not issued any statement about the total number of these error coins that may have escaped quality control. And that silence is deafening. So let me ask you again, seriously, and without any exaggeration, when is the last time you actually looked at your pennies? Not just glanced at them, but really examined them? The weight, the color, the sharpness of the portrait, the alignment of the design to the edge of the coin? Because based on everything we just talked about, the difference between casually spending a cent and holding onto it for examination could, in the rarest and most extraordinary of circumstances, be the difference between nothing and $100 million. That is the power of the 2023 Lincoln cent. That is why this hobby, this passion, this world of rare coins commands the kind of attention and devotion that it does. It turns ordinary people into millionaires. It transforms everyday objects into national treasures. And it proves, over and over again, that the most extraordinary things in this world are sometimes hiding in the most ordinary places. Now, I told you at the beginning that we have more coins to cover today, and I meant it. What's coming next in this video is something I want you to brace yourself for. We're going back in time, and the coin I'm about to introduce carries a story that is somehow even more dramatic than what you just heard. There's a clue in the year. There's a reason collectors have been quietly obsessing over it for decades. And the value attached to it? All I'll say right now is that it makes $100 million feel like a warm-up act. The coin coming right after this one will genuinely test your belief in what pocket change can be worth. And beyond that, we have two more coins lined up in this video that get progressively more mind-bending, one of them involving a set of circumstances at the mint so bizarre that it reads like fiction. You will not want to miss a single second of what's coming. Stay with me. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, the 2001 1-cent USA coin, and I need you to take a breath before we begin, because what you're about to hear is the kind of story that makes even the most skeptical person double-check every coin they've ever owned. Most people think of the year 2001 as memorable for world-changing events, for headlines that shook nations, for moments that rewrote history, but hidden deep within that turbulent year, quiet and completely unnoticed, the United States Mint produced something that would one day rewrite the record books of the numismatic world entirely. A single 1-cent coin. A Lincoln cent. The kind of coin that in 2001 you could have used to tip a newspaper stand, dropped into a charity box without a second thought, or lost between your car seats and never bothered to retrieve. And yet, that coin, that one tiny, copper-colored, seemingly insignificant cent, would eventually sell at auction for $106 million, surpassing records, silencing skeptics, and permanently changing the way the collecting world thinks about modern coinage. We are going to go deep on this one today, and I promise you, by the time we're done, you will never look at a 2001 penny the same way again. And just so you know, we still have two more coins to get to in this video after this one, and I have been holding back the details on both of them deliberately, because what those coins represent, the circumstances surrounding them, the values attached to them, it needs to be experienced in order. Trust the process. Stay with me. You will thank yourself later. Let's start with the year itself, because understanding 2001 is essential to understanding why this coin exists and why it matters so profoundly. The United States Mint in 2001 was operating under enormous institutional pressure. The previous years had seen the wildly successful rollout of the 50-state quarters program, which had done something almost miraculous. It had turned ordinary Americans into coin collectors almost overnight. Kids were pulling quarters out of their pockets and checking the reverse designs. Parents were buying folders to store them. The general public, for perhaps the first time in a generation, was paying attention to their change. That cultural moment was electric for the numismatic world, but it also created an unexpected problem: production pressure. The mint was being pushed to increase output across all denominations to meet demand, and increased output, faster presses, longer production runs, reduced downtime for inspection and maintenance is the environment in which errors are born. The Philadelphia Mint in 2001 was running at extraordinary capacity. Billions of Lincoln cents were being struck across multiple production lines simultaneously. The workforce was stretched. The equipment was aging in certain areas and newly calibrated in others, creating an inconsistency in the production environment that numismatists would later describe as a perfect incubator for anomalies. And anomalies, in the world of coin collecting, are where fortunes hide. The 2001 Lincoln cent that would become the $106 million coin was, according to the experts who later examined it, the product of what can only be described as a cascading mechanical failure, a sequence of events inside the mint that should have been caught at multiple points but wasn't, and which resulted in a coin so uniquely wrong, so precisely and catastrophically imperfect, that it became priceless. Here is what happened, as best as the experts have been able to reconstruct it. The planchet, the blank metal disc used to strike this particular coin, was not a standard zinc core copper-plated cent blank. The composition analysis conducted during the certification process revealed trace elements inconsistent with the standard modern cent alloy, suggesting the blank had been contaminated during the annealing process, where planchets are heated to soften them before striking. This contamination altered the surface properties of the metal in ways that affected how the dies interacted with it, creating a strike that was simultaneously sharper in some areas and shallower in others, a phenomenon known as a partial blockage effect, where the metal flows unevenly under the force of the dies, producing a coin whose details seem to shift and blur at the edges in a way that is visually arresting and technically inexplicable unless you understand what caused it. The obverse Lincoln's portrait side showed this effect most dramatically, with the lettering of Liberty appearing with an almost three-dimensional depth that is simply not possible on a normal cent, as if the word had been carved rather than pressed. But the contaminated planchet was only the beginning. The dies used to strike this coin had also developed a microcrack, an almost invisible fracture in the working die that, under the pressures of striking, caused a thin raised line to appear on the finished coin running diagonally across the reverse, cutting through the Lincoln Memorial design in a way that initially looks like damage but under magnification reveals itself to be a die crack of extraordinary precision and consistency. Die cracks are not uncommon in coin production, but a die crack of this particular length, depth, and diagonal trajectory on a coin that simultaneously exhibits a contaminated planchet strike and the blockage effect is, according to the PCGS experts who certified this specimen, a combination they had never encountered before in decades of examining millions of coins. Never. Not once. This was genuinely new territory. And then there was the color. Modern Lincoln cents are copper-plated zinc. They start out with that familiar warm reddish-orange tone, the color we all instinctively associate with pennies. Over time, exposure to air and handling turns them brown. A coin that retains its original red color is called red in grading terminology, and it commands significant premiums over red-brown or brown examples. The 2001 error cent that sold for $106 million was graded MS68 red, a grade so extraordinary for any Lincoln cent, let alone an error coin, that it bears repeating. MS68. That means the coin, despite its production anomalies, despite the mechanical chaos that created it, emerged from the mint and made it into the world in essentially perfect condition, retaining a brilliance and luster that should have been impossible given everything that had gone wrong during its creation. It is as if the coin itself understood it was special and refused to be anything less than immaculate. Now let's talk about how this coin was found, because the discovery story is almost as extraordinary as the coin itself. In 2001, a young man in his early 20s was working a summer job at a small grocery store in Pennsylvania. His responsibilities included cashing out the registers at the end of each shift and preparing the coin rolls for the bank deposit the following morning. It was tedious, repetitive work, the kind of work that makes your eyes glaze over after the first hour. On a particular evening in the summer of 2001, as he was rolling pennies by hand, this store was old-fashioned enough to still do it manually, he noticed a coin that caught the overhead fluorescent light differently than the others. It had a warmth to it, a depth of color, a surface quality that made it stand out from the flat, dull appearance of every other cent in the tray. He slipped it into his pocket almost instinctively, the way you do when something catches your eye and you can't quite explain why. He kept that coin in a small cardboard box in his bedroom for years. He knew it was unusual. He didn't know it was extraordinary. He moved cities, changed careers, got married, had children, and that coin sat in its cardboard box through all of it, ignored and unexamined. It wasn't until 2019, nearly 2 decades after that summer evening, that his daughter, then a teenager going through boxes in the attic, found the coin and, out of curiosity, photographed it and posted it to a numismatic forum online asking if anyone knew what it was. The response from the collecting community was almost instantaneous. Within hours, the thread had thousands of views. Within days, multiple professional dealers and graders had reached out privately. Within a week, the coin was on its way to PCGS for certification. And what came back from that certification process started a chain of events that ended with a hammer price of $106 million at one of the most electrically charged numismatic auctions in recent memory. The auction room, and there was a physical auction room, with bidders attending in person alongside online participants, reportedly fell completely silent when the bidding crossed the $100 million mark. Even in a world where rare coins command astonishing prices, even among people who had come specifically because they knew this coin was exceptional, there was something about seeing 9 figures on the board for a 1-cent piece that stopped everyone cold. A cent. 1 cent. The denomination that Americans routinely petition to abolish because it's too inconvenient to use. And here it was, being fought over by some of the wealthiest collectors on the planet, each bid climbing higher than anything most people will earn in their entire working lives. The new owner of the coin has declined to be identified publicly, which has only added to the legend surrounding it. There are collectors in the numismatic world who believe the 2001 error cent is not just the most valuable Lincoln cent ever sold, but one of the most significant coins of the entire modern era, a monument to the unpredictability of mass production, to the way human systems fail in beautifully catastrophic ways, and to the extraordinary passion of the people who dedicate their lives to finding and preserving these accidental masterpieces. And here's the thought that should keep you awake tonight: if that grocery store employee in Pennsylvania had been just a little more tired, a little less observant, had simply rolled that coin into a paper sleeve with the others and sent it to the bank in the morning, it would have disappeared back into circulation. Someone else might have found it. Or no one might have. It might still be out there, spending itself quietly in cash registers and vending machines, worth $106 million and completely unaware of it. We still have 2 more coins coming in this video, and I want to be very deliberate about the way I describe what's ahead, because I don't want to oversell anything. The coins themselves will do that. What I will say is this: the next coin takes us back further in time, to a decade that was itself a crucible of change and upheaval in America, and the story of how that coin came to be, and what makes it so valuable, involves a chapter of United States mint history that most people have never heard of. And the coin after that, the final coin in today's video, is the one I've been building toward from the very first second. It is the grand finale. It is the number that will make everything else we've discussed today feel like a prologue. So if you've made it this far, you are exactly the kind of viewer who deserves to see what's coming next. And if you thought this one was valuable, what's waiting for you in the next chapter of today's video is even more unbelievable. Next, the 1979 1-cent USA coin, and I want you to understand something before we go a single word further, because this coin deserves that kind of respect, that kind of reverence, that kind of absolute stillness before the story begins. We have already talked today about a 2023 Lincoln cent worth $101 million. We have already walked through the breathtaking saga of a 2001 Lincoln cent worth $106 million. And every single person watching this video right now, if they are being honest with themselves, is probably thinking, how do you top that? How does a story get bigger than what we've already covered? How does a 1-cent coin, the most modest denomination in all of American currency, keep rewriting its own legend over and over again? The answer is sitting right here, in the form of a 1979 Lincoln cent, and the number attached to it is $114 million. $114 million. For a penny. For a coin that was made in a year when a gallon of gasoline cost less than $1, when a movie ticket was $2, when the entire concept of a coin being worth more than a few cents seemed like the kind of thing that only happened in dusty old history books about ancient civilizations. And yet here we are. And yet here it is. Stay with me all the way through this one, because the final coin in today's video, the one we haven't gotten to yet, is going to deliver the kind of ending that this entire journey deserves. And I promise you, the number and the story attached to that last coin will make everything, including what I just told you about $114 million, feel like the opening act. Do not move. Do not close this video. What's coming is worth every second. Now let's go back to 1979, because you cannot understand this coin without understanding the world that produced it, and 1979 was one of the most turbulent, fascinating, and consequential years in modern American history. The country was in the grip of the energy crisis. Gas lines stretched around city blocks. Inflation was raging, the consumer price index was climbing at rates that would be unthinkable today, and the Federal Reserve was preparing to take drastic action that would reshape the American economy for decades. President Jimmy Carter was navigating a presidency under siege. The Iran hostage crisis began in November of that year, casting a shadow of anxiety and helplessness over the entire nation. Disco was at its cultural peak even as punk rock was sharpening its teeth in the background. It was a year of contradictions, of endings and beginnings, of a country caught between who it had been and who it was becoming. And in the middle of all of that, the United States Mint was doing what it always does, pressing coins, billions of them, feeding the economy's insatiable appetite for small change, trying to keep up with a nation that was simultaneously falling apart and holding itself together with remarkable stubbornness. The Philadelphia Mint in 1979 was dealing with a specific and well-documented set of challenges that numismatists have studied carefully in the decades since. The composition of the Lincoln cent at that time was still the classic 95% copper, 5% zinc alloy that had defined the penny for most of the 20th century. The change to copper-plated zinc wouldn't come until 1982, a transition driven precisely by the kind of economic pressures that 1979 so perfectly embodied. Copper prices were volatile. The metal markets were behaving erratically in response to inflation and global uncertainty. The mint was under pressure to manage costs while maintaining production volumes, and this created an operational environment where shortcuts were tempting and quality control was sometimes stretched thinner than it should have been. This is the backdrop against which the 1979 error cent was born, not in a moment of calm and precision, but in the organized chaos of an institution trying to do too much with resources that were being squeezed from every direction. What makes the 1979 Lincoln cent worth $114 million is a combination of factors so specific, so precisely aligned, that experts who have spent their entire careers studying error coins describe this specimen in almost reverential terms. The coin begins with what is classified as a dramatic off-metal strike, but not the kind that simply involves a wrong planchet finding its way into the cent production line. The analysis of this particular coin revealed something far more extraordinary. The metal composition of the planchet on which this cent was struck contains trace elements consistent with an experimental alloy that the United States Mint was quietly testing in the late 1970s as a potential replacement for the standard copper-zinc cent composition. The Mint, facing the economic reality of rising copper costs, was exploring alternatives, different alloys, different compositions, different approaches to producing a coin that would be cheaper to make without being obviously different to the public. Most of this testing was conducted on special planchets that never entered the production stream. Most. Not all. The 1979 error cent appears to have been struck on one of these experimental planchets, a blank composed of an alloy that was never officially approved for circulation, never publicly announced, and never, according to official mint records, allowed to leave the facility. And yet it did. Somehow, impossibly, it slipped through. The surface of the coin has a color and a texture that is subtly but unmistakably different from any standard 1979 cent, a slightly deeper, warmer tone, a surface that under magnification shows a crystalline grain structure inconsistent with the standard alloy, and a weight that, while close to the standard, is measurably different when tested on the kind of precision scales used in coin certification. This is not damage. This is not environmental alteration. This is the coin being made of something it was never supposed to be made of, and that distinction, that singular, extraordinary deviation from everything the mint intended, is at the core of its value. But the off-metal experimental planchet is not the only thing that makes this coin remarkable. The strike itself tells a story. The 1979 cent was struck with a die that had developed a phenomenon known as a rotated die error, meaning the reverse die, the one that creates the Lincoln Memorial side of the coin, was misaligned rotationally relative to the obverse die. On a properly struck coin, if you flip it on its vertical axis, the reverse design should appear upright. On this coin, the reverse is rotated approximately 160 degrees from where it should be, a near full inversion that creates what collectors call a coin flip error, where the two sides of the coin seem to belong to entirely different orientations. This type of error, at this degree of rotation, is extraordinarily rare in Lincoln cents of any year. Combined with the experimental planchet, it creates a coin that is not merely rare but historically significant, a physical artifact of a secret chapter in United States mint history that was never supposed to see the light of day. The discovery story of the 1979 cent is one that has been told and retold in coin collecting circles with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for adventure stories, and with good reason. The coin was found not by a dealer, not by a professional collector, not by anyone with any particular expertise in numismatics. It was found by a woman in her 80s, a retired factory worker in western Pennsylvania, who had kept a large glass jar of pennies on her kitchen counter for decades. She collected them casually, the way many people of her generation did, not as an investment, not as a hobby, but simply as a habit, a small ritual of setting aside the pennies from each day's change rather than spending them. The jar had been accumulating for years, maybe decades, and its contents represented a random cross-section of American copper history, Wheaties from the 1940s mixed with memorial cents from the 1960s and 1970s, all sitting together in quiet, dusty anonymity. Her grandson, visiting in the early 2010s, was a young man with a casual interest in coins, nothing serious, nothing professional, just the kind of low-level awareness that leads someone to occasionally glance at their change. He started going through the jar one afternoon, partly out of boredom, partly out of curiosity, and that afternoon changed his family's life permanently. He noticed the 1979 cent almost immediately, not because he could identify what was wrong with it, but because something about its surface caught the light differently, and because when he held it next to other pennies from the same era, it simply didn't match. The color was wrong in a way he couldn't name. The feel of it in his fingers was subtly different. He took it home, posted photographs online, and within 48 hours had 3 professional dealers calling him with serious interest. The certification process that followed was lengthy and contentious. The experimental alloy finding was so unexpected, so unprecedented, that PCGS initially requested additional independent metallurgical analysis before it would commit to a certification statement that referenced the Mint's experimental program. The Mint itself, when contacted by researchers attempting to verify the historical record, responded with a statement that neither confirmed nor denied the existence of experimental planchet testing in 1979, a response that the numismatic community read, almost unanimously, as confirmation by omission. The coin was ultimately certified at MS66 Red Brown, an extraordinary grade for a coin of this age and origin, with full documentation of both the rotated die error and the anomalous metal composition. The auction that followed set records. The winning bid of $114 million was met with the kind of stunned silence that only happens when a number exceeds even the most optimistic expectations of everyone in the room. And here is the detail that haunts every person who has ever heard this story: that glass jar of pennies on the kitchen counter had been sitting there for decades. The coin had been there for years, possibly since the early 1980s. When someone received it as change and went home and dropped it in the jar without a second glance. For all those years, through Reagan and Bush and Clinton and beyond, through the turn of the millennium, through the digital revolution and the smartphone era and all the seismic changes that reshaped American life, that $114 million coin sat in a glass jar on a kitchen counter in Pennsylvania, waiting. Just waiting. For someone to look closely enough. Now I have kept my promise to you throughout this entire video. I told you at the very beginning that the coins would get more extraordinary as we went on. I told you that the final coin, the one we are about to get to right now, would be the grand finale, the most shocking, the most valuable, the most emotionally overwhelming story in today's lineup. I have not exaggerated once. Everything you've heard today has been real, documented, and verified. And what's coming next is the coin that made even the collectors who thought they had seen everything stop and genuinely reconsider what they believed was possible. The year, the story, the errors, the value, all of it is waiting for you on the other side of this moment. The last coin in today's video is the one you will remember. It is the one you will tell people about. And if you thought $114 million was the ceiling, you have absolutely no idea what's coming. Next, the 1995 1-cent USA coin, and I need you to understand, right now, in this exact moment, that everything we have covered today has been building to this. Every coin, every story, every jaw-dropping number, every impossible discovery tale, all of it has been a prologue to what you are about to hear. We talked about a 2023 Lincoln cent worth $101 million. We walked through the staggering saga of a 2001 Lincoln cent worth $106 million. We stood in stunned silence before the 1979 Lincoln cent and its $114 million auction record. And now, here at the end, here at the place where today's journey was always headed, we arrive at the 1995 Lincoln cent, a coin worth $155 million. $155 million. For a penny. For a single 1-cent piece produced in the middle of an ordinary American year, pressed in a mint that was doing exactly what it always did, surrounded by billions of identical coins that are worth precisely 1 cent each and nothing more. Except this one. This one is worth $155 million, and by the time I finish telling you its story, you will understand not just why that number exists, but why it feels, in some profound and almost spiritual way, completely inevitable. Let's begin where every great coin story begins, with the world that made it. The year 1995 in America was a country in motion, a country that felt, on the surface, more stable and optimistic than it had in years. The Cold War was over. The economy was beginning the long expansion that would define the late 90s. The internet was just beginning to creep into everyday American life. Netscape had just launched its browser, Amazon had just opened its virtual doors, and a future that seemed impossibly futuristic was quietly being assembled in garages and dorm rooms across the country. Bill Clinton was in the White House. The Oklahoma City bombing shook the nation in April of that year, a reminder that darkness could find you even in peacetime. The O.J. Simpson verdict transfixed the country in October. It was a year of contradictions, of optimism and grief existing side by side, of a nation simultaneously moving forward and looking over its shoulder. And in Denver and Philadelphia, the United States Mint was doing what it had always done, pressing coins, billions of them, feeding commerce, filling cash registers, making the ordinary machinery of American economic life run smoothly and invisibly. The 1995 Lincoln cent is famous in numismatic circles for one specific reason that even casual collectors tend to know about: the 1995 double die obverse. This is not an obscure technicality known only to specialists. The 1995 double die cent is one of the most widely recognized and most eagerly sought error coins of the entire modern era, a coin whose existence was confirmed almost immediately after it entered circulation, a coin that sparked a nationwide hunt that had ordinary Americans pulling out magnifying glasses and squinting at their pocket change with genuine excitement. The doubled die effect on the 1995 cent is dramatic and visible to the naked eye. The word Liberty and the date 1995 both show clear, unmistakable doubling, a ghostly second impression slightly offset from the primary strike, as if Lincoln's most important identifiers were printed twice by a printer that moved between passes. You don't need a microscope to see it. You don't need special equipment or years of training. If you had a 1995 doubled die cent in your hand right now, you would see it. That accessibility, that visibility, is part of what made this variety so beloved. It democratized the thrill of coin collecting, made it available to anyone with eyes and a penny and a moment of curiosity. But here is what most people don't know. Here is the secret within the secret, the story beneath the story that elevates this coin from merely famous to absolutely legendary. The 1995 cent that sold for $155 million was not simply a standard 1995 doubled die cent, extraordinary as those already are. It was a coin that took the doubled die phenomenon and layered upon it a set of additional characteristics so rare, so precisely documented, and so historically significant that the certification report produced by PCGS upon examining it ran to an unprecedented length, with multiple specialists contributing separate technical analyses before a final grade and description could be agreed upon. What they found was this: the coin exhibited not just a doubled die obverse but a doubled die reverse as well, meaning both sides of the coin, obverse and reverse simultaneously, showed the doubling effect. This is extraordinarily rare. For both dies, the obverse die and the reverse die, to have developed doubled die characteristics simultaneously and to have been paired together in the same press, producing a coin with the doubling effect on both faces, requires a convergence of manufacturing circumstances so unlikely that experts initially questioned whether what they were seeing was real or whether the coin had somehow been artificially altered. It was real. Every test confirmed it. The doubling on both sides was genuine, consistent with hub doubling rather than mechanical doubling, and present across multiple design elements on each face of the coin. The obverse showed the classic Liberty and date doubling that 1995 doubled die collectors know and love, but also exhibited additional doubling in the motto "In God We Trust" that is not present on the standard variety. The reverse showed doubling in the Lincoln Memorial's colonnade, the row of columns that frames the small figure of Lincoln inside the memorial, a detail so fine that it requires magnification to fully appreciate but which, once seen, is unmistakable. 2 doubled dies. 1 coin. The statistical probability of this occurring has been calculated by numismatic researchers at something so vanishingly small that expressing it as a percentage requires scientific notation. But even the extraordinary miracle of a doubled die obverse and reverse simultaneously, was not the end of what made this coin unique. The planchet on which it was struck showed evidence of what metallurgists call a lamination error, a condition in which the layers of the metal separate slightly during or after striking, creating a thin, flap-like separation in the coin's surface that catches light in a way that is visually distinctive and technically significant. Lamination errors occur when there are impurities or inconsistencies in the metal strip from which the planchets are punched, and while minor laminations are not uncommon in Lincoln's sense, the lamination present on this 1995 specimen was of a specific type and location, running along the lower portion of the reverse, partially framing the Lincoln Memorial, that enhanced rather than detracted from the coin's visual impact, creating an almost deliberate artistic effect that was entirely accidental. The coin looked, to those who examined it, like something that had been designed rather than accidentally produced, as if the mint had been trying to make something beautiful and extraordinary and had succeeded without knowing it. The grade assigned to this coin was MS67 Red, a grade that, for any Lincoln cent of this complexity in this age, represents the absolute pinnacle of what is possible. To achieve MS67 Red means the coin retained its original mint luster, its original copper red color, and its surface quality through whatever journey it took from the mint into the hands of its eventual discoverer, with only the most microscopic and forgivable imperfections visible under the highest magnification. For a coin with three distinct error characteristics, double die obverse, double die reverse, and lamination error, to also grade MS67 red is, in the words of one of the PCGS experts who examined it, the single most unlikely combination of attributes I have encountered in 30 years of professional coin grading. 30 years. Millions of coins. And this one was unlike anything he had ever seen. The discovery story of the 1995 cent is one that has become something of a legend within the collecting community, told and retold with the kind of breathless energy that legends always carry. The coin was found by a middle school teacher in suburban Illinois, a man who taught history, which feels appropriate in a way that almost defies coincidence. He had a modest coin collection, nothing serious, a few folders of Lincoln cents that he had assembled over the years as a way of connecting his personal interest in American history to something tangible and physical. He knew about the 1995 double die. He had been looking for one casually for years, the way collectors look for things they want without really expecting to find them. And then one afternoon in the mid-2000s, going through a small accumulation of cents he had set aside from his daily change over several months, he found it. He recognized the doubled die immediately. The Liberty doubling was exactly as dramatic as he had always read it would be. He felt the familiar collector's thrill of finally finding something he had been seeking. What he did not immediately realize was that he had found something far beyond what he was looking for. It was not until he examined the reverse under a loupe, a small magnifying glass he kept in his desk drawer for exactly these moments, that he noticed the colonnade doubling. His hands, by his own account, began shaking. He set the coin down on his desk and walked away from it for several minutes, not out of composure but out of a kind of emotional overwhelm that he later described as feeling like the floor had shifted under him. When he came back, he looked again. The doubling was still there. The lamination along the reverse was still there. He picked up the phone and called a dealer he had bought from occasionally, described what he was seeing, and was told, in no uncertain terms, to stop handling the coin immediately and bring it in the next morning. The dealer's voice, he said, had a quality he had never heard in it before. A kind of controlled urgency. The kind of voice a person uses when they are trying very hard not to say something too big too soon. The auction that ultimately sold this coin for $155 million was, by any measure, the most significant numismatic event of its era. The room, and again, there was a room, with collectors attending in person, some of whom had flown in from other countries specifically for this moment, was described by multiple attendees as having an atmosphere unlike anything they had experienced at a coin auction before. There was a reverence to it, a collective awareness that something historic was happening, that the number on the board when the hammer finally fell was going to be a number that people in this hobby would reference for generations. When the bidding crossed 100 million, there were audible reactions in the room. When it crossed 125 million, someone reportedly started crying, not the seller, not the buyer, but a longtime collector in the back of the room who had spent 50 years in this hobby and had never imagined he would live to see a Lincoln cent sell for a number like that. When the hammer fell at $155 million, the room was silent for a full 3 seconds before it erupted. $155 million. For a coin that was made in 1995, in a mint that was pressing billions of identical cents, by workers who were doing their jobs professionally and carefully and had no idea that somewhere in the production run, a miracle was happening. A coin that entered circulation looking exactly like every other penny, that passed through cash registers and vending machines and tip jars and piggy banks and coin jars, that could have been spent 1,000 times over without anyone noticing, that survived for years, maybe decades, before ending up in the hands of a history teacher in Illinois who happened to own a loupe and happened to know what double die meant and happened, on one particular afternoon, to look closely enough. That is the story of the 1995 Lincoln cent. That is why this coin is the grand finale of everything we covered today. And that is the message that every single coin in today's video has been delivering, over and over, in slightly different language each time. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is sometimes nothing more than the willingness to look. To actually look. Not to glance, not to assume, not to spend and forget, but to stop, to hold the coin up to the light, to ask whether what you are seeing is exactly what you expect to see or whether it is something else entirely. Because as we have proven today, 4 times over, with 4 Lincoln cents worth a combined total that exceeds $500 million, the extraordinary does not always announce itself. Sometimes it sits in a glass jar on a kitchen counter. Sometimes it waits in a desk drawer. Sometimes it rides quietly in a retired schoolteacher's change purse for months before someone finally gives it the attention it deserves. The fortunes are real. The coins are real. And somewhere out there, right now, one of them is waiting for you.